and welcome to the Footy Frontline podcast. My name is D'Urbano and I'm joined here by Ollie Caffrey to look at all the big headlines and look ahead to this weekend in AFL footy. It's only Wednesdays we record this, but there's been plenty that's been happening, Ollie. The biggest news of all, West Coast parting ways with head coach Adam Simpson. It came, it's not a surprising bit of news, but it came quite, swiftly after there was word that Tim Kelly's press conference was cancelled and the news came through that Simpson will be wrapping up his time at West Coast. We don't know when, but we believe that it is going to happen at some point this year.
Oh, it's going to happen whether it's on this weekend or even before. They're still undecided whether he's going to do the farewell game or not. It was just a bit of a car crash press conference, really. Don Pike, the CEO, came in and said, we hope that Adam Simpson will accept the farewell game. And yeah, Simpson looked like he was caught off guard a bit and wasn't really sure whether he wanted to do it or not. I don't think he wants to do it. I think he just wants to. I think he was done a year ago, to be honest. This should have been done more than a year ago. This should have been done last season. I don't know why they persisted with him this year. Like we spoke about it early in the season. It was going to be another long year. They just needed a fresh start. They're going to get it now, but it's 12 months too late. You just needed to develop some of those younger players, and probably at the start of the season, it looked like that was going to be the case. Like they have been better than they were last season. They were abysmal last season. That was one of the worst AFL seasons in memory from any team. And they've had a couple of good wins this year. Beat Melbourne, who they got thrashed by on the weekend, and ironically that brings the time to an end. Yeah, it was interesting timing. Like after a 54-point loss on the road, it's not even close to being any of their worst losses in the last 3 years. And that's the moment his time comes to an end. So yeah, it obviously been bubbling away in the background for a while. It looked to me like Adam Simpson was done for a long time, and yeah, I question why the Eagles persisted with him this year and why he went on. But yeah, he was contracted, so I think there was a bit of negotiating there and when he was actually going to finish, because he's still going to get a reasonable payout because he's still contracted for next season. So if they sacked him with 2 seasons ago, that's a lot of money to give up, even though they are the wealthiest club in the AFL. So yeah, fresh start now. Whether he's still undecided. We're recording on Wednesday afternoon and they're playing Sunday and they still haven't decided who's going to actually be coaching on the weekend, which is, I think it's a farce. Like, just make a call. Just make a decision, like one way or the other. So it is, Adam Simpson started off as a great coach and a great record. First 7, 8 seasons, yeah, he was flying, but yeah, the last 3 years have probably tarnished his legacy quite a bit. I think if he wanted another coaching job down the track, he probably should have left definitely last season, and yeah, going on too long. Like to coach 8 wins from his last 62 games, that's going to do a bit of damage. He's going to end up in some job. He's going to still remain in footy, I think, after a bit of a break, whether that's in a football managing role or another assistant coaching role. But yeah, for a head coaching role, I think quite a bit of damage has been done. He's a premiership coach, coached in the finals for I think 5 or 6 years in a row. But yeah, the end is very, very bad.
I think it's so unfortunate when you look back at, as you spoke about, his tenure, because he did a lot of good stuff early. I mean, came in, replaced John Worsfold, grand final in the second year where they lost against one of the best teams in the modern era in Hawthorn. They won the premiership in 2018, and you can probably argue that from that moment, things have been on a bit of a slippery slope. Having seen some of the sentiment online, there's talk about, a lot of complacency sort of set in at West Coast after 2018, because really from that point on, you would have been, remiss. It probably would have been best to say that they could have taken at least another premiership in that period as well. I mean, 2019, they missed out in the top 4 in the last game of the season where they were in such a good position and lost against Hawthorn in that last game. And that meant they had to go the long way and they got knocked out in the semis. 2020, they lost the unlosable elimination final against Collingwood.
The Dirty Pies.
Yeah, the Dirty Pies during the COVID year. And then from there, it's just been, missing finals in 21 in the last round. And well, the last 2.5 years have just been, if you summed it up, it's been abysmal. It's been, the record has been so horrible. So you feel for him because, he's going to be remembered as a West Coast legend. He's with, the likes of Malthouse and Worsfold as premiership coaches. But yeah, I mean, it's just a shame to see it end like this because, maybe as you mentioned, he goes out 2 years earlier. Maybe he goes out maybe the end of 2022, 2023, maybe saves face just a little bit. But yeah, I think this isn't the end of Adam Simpson, whatever he decides to do. And I think that a lot of West Coast fans will remember fondly, we've seen some of the sentiment online, remember fondly the good times at West Coast, because they were a formidable opposition. When West Coast were playing well, they were a very, very good side under Adam Simpson. And it's just a shame that these last few years that we're going to be looking back at this, at least for now, as that period that sort of, that's how it ends. He doesn't go out sort of in the blaze of glory. But I mean, how many coaches in the last few years have we seen, good coaches at that, when it gets that last year and things start going badly, that the pressure starts coming? When you look at Buckley, when you look at what happened with Clarkson at Hawthorn.
Liam Cameron.
Yep. So now the question is, what's next? I mean, what's next for West Coast? They've always kind of gone down, since Malthouse, to quite an untried pathway. Worsfold, and then into Simpson, who, both were first-time head coaches. I mean, is it a case of, do you think, going down the untried pathway? I mean, there's already been Dean Cox linked, a club legend, to come back. It seems like almost the fairy tale sort of story of a club legend coming back and coaching the team. Or do you think maybe they look at someone a bit more experienced?
I think they have to go with an untried coach. It's going to be a long rebuild. They've still got a lot of veterans to retire in the next few years. It's not a young list. You think if your team's on the bottom of the ladder like North Melbourne is, you got a lot of young talent coming through. But yeah, they just haven't really gone to the draft too much into the last few years. Obviously, they've got Harley Reid over there. They need to get him to stay. Will this sort of upset him a bit? We'll just see what the new coach comes in and does. But yeah, I think they have to go with an untried coach. And Dean Cox looms as the logical replacement. He's done a really lengthy apprenticeship at Sydney. He's learned off one of the best coaches of the modern era in John Longmire. And there was probably a bit of talk that maybe Cox would take over from Longmire eventually, but I don't think Longmire is a coach who really wants to go out anytime soon. He's still at the top of his game. The Swans are on top of the ladder, challenging for another premiership. I don't think, he doesn't look like a coach that is going anytime soon. So Cox might be thinking, okay, well, if I stay at Sydney, I might be waiting another 5 or so years before I get the top job, and the chance to go back to your old club where you're a club legend and take a team on the way up. And traditionally, West Coast have been a club that has rebounded really quickly. This has been the worst period in their history to stay down the bottom for 3 years in a row, and probably be 4 years next year. So, but they've come out of just really diabolical positions in the past. They won the wooden spoon in 2010 and then made a prelim in 2011.
It's just insane.
They're just a really great club traditionally, but they need to get their act together. Like, they've just been a basket case. And the way they handle that press conference, as I said, just the way they've managed this all in the last 24 months, probably since the 18 premiership, really, things have just really slid. And I just think Simpson should have gone out at the end of last season. They had that great win against the Western Bulldogs, one of the biggest upsets in modern AFL history. No one saw that coming. They knocked the Bulldogs out of finals contention. It was a really uplifting sort of victory. And second last game of the season would have been a perfect farewell, go back home in the last round and say goodbye. But no, they went another year, and this is where we are. So, Jared Schofield will eventually take over as coach for the rest of the season, whether it's against the Lions on Sunday or it's the week after. So, we'll just wait and see. But, Nathan Buckley's been thrown up there as maybe getting back in there. But, I'm not sure if he really wants to coach again. He seems pretty comfortable in the media right now. He's now 3 seasons out of the AFL system. So, it's gone quickly. I think he would add a lot to club level if he went back. But, I don't think any experienced coach wants to go in there and know it's like a 3-4 year rebuild before they're probably getting back into finals. So, it's going to be an untried coach to just try and get them back up, and we'll see. But, I think Dean Cox has to be the favourite right now, and West Coast will definitely talk to him.
Well, you expect some of the other names, someone like a Sean Grigg and Andrew McQualter, who was the caretaker at Richmond last year. Jamie Graham, who, of course, is another former
Definitely
West Coast
Jamie
player
Graham,
as well.
He's at the Dockers at the moment.
Yep, and Scott Selwood as well is another one to keep an eye on, who, of course, has been an assistant at Collingwood. You know, maybe a Justin Lepage, who's always seems like his name's thrown up to get back into coaching or go elsewhere. He might be looked at. Daniel Jun, Siracusa. It feels like there's always that same sort of list of names that always come up. But really from the experience ranks, I mean, as you mentioned, like Nathan Buckley and Leon Cameron are probably two of the only ones that are sort of available at the moment.
Leon Cameron's not doing it. He's not moving over to Perth. He's very settled in Sydney. That's why he's working for the Swans right now. Like, I don't think he would have wanted to work for the Swans, considering he was at GWS for 10 years and he's gone to their biggest rival. But it's purely that he wanted to stay in Sydney to be with his family and his kids to remain pretty stable. So, yeah, I can't see Leon Cameron moving to the other side of and especially for a long rebuild. So that sort of does rule out the experienced coaches, I think.
Well, I think we've seen recently a lot of the times, bar maybe North Melbourne, like with a team that's rebuilding with bringing Clarkson, they've usually gone the untried path when you look at Adam Kingsley and Craig McRae, etc. You know, Adam Uze this year at the Tigers as well. So it'll be a fascinating few weeks coming up for West Coast, but all focus as to who's next for coming in for Adam Simpson. But hopefully this isn't the end of him in footy. Hopefully he's back at some point, but after a well-deserved break, after a very long tenure as West Coast coach. One of the other big bits of news this week was at the Tribunal. Isaac Heeney suspended for one game. We think it is being appealed again at the time of recording. We're still not sure what's going to happen in the second appeal, but appealed last night, Tuesday. Didn't get off. Obviously, we saw the incident, what happened with him and Jimmy Webster on Sunday. If it does get upheld, it means that he'll be ineligible for the Brownlow. I mean, we've seen with the Rising Star just talking about Harley Reid and Sam Darcy being, you know, wiped out of winning that. But now there's a situation where someone who is probably going to be right up there at this stage in the Brownlow count might not be eligible to win it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to fly out of the blocks. He had an amazing first half of the season. And, yeah, there's no doubt he'd be leading the count pretty early. I think his form in maybe the last 4 to 6 weeks probably hasn't been as strong as it was early, but yeah, he's going to really charge out, and yeah, it'll be a bit nervous for I think everyone involved on Brownlow night to see his name up there if the appeal doesn't come off. So yeah, the appeal will go ahead on Thursday night, and yeah, it gets tricky. Like, it's such a long process. You have the MRO, and then like if it's going to be a case like this where it's one of the best players in the AFL, they're always going to challenge it. Go to the Tribunal Tuesday night, and then the appeal takes place, and then all of a sudden it's the weekend. So I think they just need to fast track this and just really speed up the process, because it just drags on too long, and it has for a long period of time now. Like, you go back a couple of years ago, it was the very similar situation, the Patrick Cripps case in 2022 that got decided nearly Friday morning. The appeal went for about 4.5 hours, nearly went to midnight, and Cripps ended up getting off on a technicality, and obviously ended up winning the Brownlow that year. And he actually came out this week and said, yeah, they probably need to look at reviewing the eligibility for Brownlow medals just going forward. The AFL needs to have a look at it going forward, because rules have changed since the Brownlow medal first came in. It is the best and fairest award, but players can get rubbed out for nothing these days in comparison to even 10, 20 years ago. So, yeah, maybe that's something they'll look at. But, yeah, I think the Swans are going to have a lot of contenders on Brownlow night anyway. Gerald Goulden was up there last year, almost pinched it. He's going to get a lot of votes. And Chad Warner as well. He's had a terrific season, so he'll be up there too. But, yeah, looks like Nick Dacos and maybe Patrick Cripps will sneak his second Brownlow medal. But I think probably Nick Dacos at the moment deserves to be the Brownlow favourite. Even on Friday night, I think he was almost best on ground. I know Zach Merritt got a lot of plaudits for that game, but yeah, Dacos was brewing again, and he's probably not going to have guys taking votes off him like he did last year, and obviously had that injury, which cost him dearly.
He would have probably won it if he didn't get injured. Yeah,
exactly.
He probably plays 2 more games, and he'd back him to at least poll in those games as well. So, I mean, you mentioned it. It's funny now in a way, not, you know, sort of in an ironic way, that Cripps now could be the benefactor of someone, being suspended, and he might be able to surge up the rankings and might be able to, win it as a result of if Heaney is ineligible. I mean, Bontempelli is another name that you'd think would be right up there. So it's going to be an interesting run to the finish. I mean, we'll take a look ahead at this weekend's games, but even if Heeney is missing against North Melbourne, even though Sydney have lost their last two, you think they should still be fine. But we'll preview that game in just a moment because we'll start with Friday night. It all kicks off between the Pies and the Cats. Collingwood back-to-back defeats. The blowtorch is on them again. We're back where we were at the start of the year, it seems. A disappointing loss against the Bombers. The Cats, a good win against the Hawks away. But Collingwood, the pressure's on again. It feels eerily similar to when they played at the end of last year as well, where Collingwood were coming in off that loss against Hawthorn. Nick Dacos was injured. Darcy Moore got injured early in that game, and Collingwood did win that night. But this game, I mean, it's delicately poised when you look at how these two teams are playing. A lot on the line, especially for the Pies.
Oh, a lot on the line for the Pies. I think if they lose this, it's going to get really tricky. Very, very tricky. They need to pinch this one because, they would have probably put that Essendon game in as a win early in the season. But, the injuries are starting to take a toll. Brody Myercheck out for the rest of the home and away season. Massive blow. They've probably got Jamie Elliott coming back this week, so that will straighten them up forward, and Dan McStay is going to return via the VFL, but he probably won't be available at AFL level for 2 to 3 weeks. They need to get him some match fitness in the VFL first before they consider him. So Geelong have really hit some form in recent weeks. The last couple of weeks they've been ominous. Like that victory against Hawthorn last week was very impressive. They could have won by even more. They probably took the foot off the pedal in the second half. Dangerfield coming back in has just really boosted them. He's not the player that he was, but he's still so important. Just a big ball in the midfield, just gets in the road of the opposition and just, creates a bit of fear in there. It's a very different looking midfield when Patrick Dangerfield is in there compared to when he was out. Like, there are a number of games there where Geelong's midfield just looked pedestrian. But now they've got Tom Stewart going to the centre bounces and he's still playing in defence. He's rushing back. But, I think the Cats, their form, they're looking like they were early in the season when they won 7 in a row. And I think, it's going to be really hard for the Pies. It was a bit of a worry in that last quarter. You just thought, okay, they're going to charge home here. They're going to do what they always do. But they looked flat. They looked really flat. They didn't have any run in them. And Craig McRae said post-game it wasn't probably the fitness. It was just more the connection that's just not clicking for them at the moment. So I'm going to go with the Cats in this one.
I think the most alarming thing on top of that was the pressure. I think it was a low for tackles that Collingwood have laid under McRae. I think it was only 1 or 2 tackles inside 50. The ball was coming out with ease. There was, it just seemed like Essendon had so much time on the ball every single time, which is so un-Collingwood. It's, Collingwood have made a name for themselves under McRae of being this pressure team and just go, relentlessly press. But they were just, after the first quarter, they were completely outrun. As you said, Craig McRae actually challenged Collingwood, don't leave it to the last quarter, going into that game against the Bombers. But it never came. There was a mini push, but it never really felt serious. It felt like Essendon just kind of kept them at an arm's length. So that was a big concern. But look, we said it last week, they had to respond, and I do feel like they will. I don't know if it'll be enough to win, though. These two teams always play good games when they've met. The last 4 meetings, when you look at all the meetings in the McRae-Scott sort of matchups from 2022 into 2023, the qualifying final in 2022 is one of the great finals of the last few years. Round 1 last year was a thriller. And both games last year yielded both teams kicking over 100 points. So I think we're going to get we could see a potential shootout. I know Collingwood's got no Brody Myercheck and no Dan McStay and potentially no Jeremy Howe as well.
Yeah.
But it's going to be. I think this game could really open up, but I think the Cats are just going to get up in this one. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I think the Cats are just going to get up over the Pies in this one, and Patrick Dangerfield looking good for 25 plus in this one as well. Saturday afternoon in Launceston, the Hawks against the Dockers. The Hawks sent crashing back to earth with that loss against Geelong. Fremantle, they solidified their place inside the top 4. It was a win that they just need to have against the Tigers, but Hawthorn, they've been very good in Tassie this year, and interestingly enough, they're not going in as favourites this game, but despite that loss against Geelong, still feel pretty good about backing them in this weekend.
Oh, me too, yeah. I'm going to tip them. I still can't completely trust Freo. It's the games like this, the 50-50 sort of games that you really have to worry about. Like, you almost, when they're big underdogs like they were against Sydney a few weeks ago, you almost back them in because they do love getting their backs against the wall and producing some upset results. So, like you mentioned, in Tassie, they're a very formidable opponent, the Hawks, and I think they can bounce back. Sam Mitchell wasn't too worried with that performance on the weekend. I thought he might have been more disappointed. Yeah, obviously the injury to Mitch Lewis, his first game back, does an ACL. That's just heartbreaking. Did it really late in that game as well when the game was well and truly over. So, yeah, really hard luck for him. But they should get Sicily back this week. He missed last week. And I think, just being in Launceston, if it was even in Melbourne, I'd probably tip the Dockers. But down in Tassie, the Hawks are... You don't want to really tip against them, and I think they can bounce back.
I think they win this one as well. I mean, Freo, look, they've been good over the last few weeks. I think we can definitely say that. But I think Hawthorn just been how good they've performed in Launceston this year. They've had some quite impressive results down there, beat the Giants down there. I mean, they beat St Kilda. Of course, St Kilda, at that point, it was a very different time in the year where Hawthorn were just finding their feet. So I think the Hawks get up in this one and they sort of bounce back a little bit. It's going to be, I don't think this is going to be a very high-scoring, must-watch sort of game. This could be quite a low-scoring, turgid affair, considering the conditions down there are never easy. But I think the Hawks just get up. But Caleb Sarong looking the goods for 25 plus in this one, though, for the Dockers. He's been in some great form. The other Saturday afternoon game over in Sydney, the Swans against the Kangaroos. Sydney have lost back-to-back games, and heartbreakingly, 2 weeks in a row, Logan McDonald's had the game on his boot and he's missed. In a period where he's just signed a contract extension, it's just felt like just the worst set of events happening in and around that for him. You do feel sorry for him, but he gets the opportunity to redeem themselves, and so do the Swans, who probably should have won that game against St Kilda, but really let their foot off the gas in that one against the much improved North Melbourne team.
Yeah, they have. Well, they won last week against Gold Coast.
Against Gold Coast,
a great win. So, yeah, they're carrying a lot of momentum from that one. Their midfield is just so impressive. They're young players coming through. Colby McKercher coming back. That was his first game for a while, and he was just outstanding off half back. And, he showed the sort of form that he did show during his junior days. He's going to be a real player to watch going forward. And, this is interesting. Like, the odds, obviously, it's 1 versus 17, but I don't think the Swans are going to absolutely belt them.
No.
They're going to be very keen to bounce back. 2 close losses in a row, and they're going to be hurting a bit, but they're still playing okay. There's no cause for panic, I don't think, for the Swans. There haven't been any holes that I've seen that could cause them too much trouble in September. I think it's probably a good period to have this little bit of a form slump before finals. You don't want to be going into finals losing 5 or 7 or whatever could be. But, 2 in a row, 2 close losses. I don't think there's any cause for concern. But, North Melbourne, I think, can go up there and be competitive like they have for the last 5 weeks. 2 wins, 3 losses. Should have been 3 wins, 2 losses, that Collingwood game. So, North Melbourne supporters are definitely more up and about than they've been for a long period of time. But, the Swans should bounce back by about 5 goals.
Yeah, I think Sydney win this comfortably. I think we will see, as you mentioned, a really spirited North Melbourne performance. I mean, when these two teams play, remember what happened last year at Marvel Stadium?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very odd game of footy, and we saw how that game was decided. I mean, Sydney winning it.
Swans was so lucky.
Yeah, and that was at a point in the year where Sydney their season was hanging by a thread. I mean, things have changed a lot since then, but I think the Swans get up in this one, and I'm tipping Logan McDonald to respond and have a really big game in this one and kick multiple goals. I think he's due for a real big showing after the last couple of weeks, and hopefully he's able to kick on and not let these last 2 weeks sort of get to him. He's such a talented youngster. Marvel Stadium, this is a big one. Bulldogs, Carlton. Very disappointing loss for the Bulldogs last week, but equally as well for Carlton, a disappointing loss on the road against GWS. They were cruising early, but then just got battered. The tsunami was back at GWS. They completely ran over Carlton, for a period in that game before the Blues made a bit of a late charge. But 2 teams, chomping at the bit to get back to winning ways. The Bulldogs, they need to get points on the board to really stay in the hunt, but Carlton don't want to let last week snowball. They really want to bounce back on their home deck.
I think they will as well. Back at Marvel Stadium, Patrick Cripps' 200th game, so extra motivation for the Blues. And it was just that period in the second and third quarter that really cost them. And the Giants, they're obviously a really good team. They finally got their mojo back a bit. So I don't think it's the worst loss in the world for the Blues, even though, it would have been really annoying. Just like you score 8 goals in the first quarter, up by 39 points at one stage, and then they're just completely blown away after that. But it's not comparable to what the Bulldogs dish up against Port Adelaide. Both very inconsistent teams, the Bulldogs and Port Adelaide. So you thought, okay, it should be a pretty even game. And the Bulldogs were never in it. That was such a disappointing performance. Their midfield just got blown away by Butters, Rosé, Horn-Francis, and just didn't fire a shot. And I think the Bulldogs season's basically done. I can't see them winning this game. They might play a bit better than they did, but they just have such a tough run to end the season. They would have to go on some sort of crazy run that they have done in the past, but I just can't see them doing it this time. There's too many holes there. They're too inconsistent. And, yeah, I think the Blues in this one.
Blues in a very tight one. I think the Bulldogs will give them like these two teams don't always mean to harken back to history, but they tend to play some pretty tight ones.
They do.
And you do get a feeling that the Bulldogs are going to, well, really with them, it depends what side of the bed they wake up on, because some weeks they're so good, they're so formidable, but then other weeks they're just a shadow of that, as we saw last week. But Carlton can't afford to let last week snowball. I think they will bounce back, but the Bulldogs aren't going to make it easy for them. I think they'll give them a real test. Harry Mackay looking good for multiple goals in this game as well. Adelaide Oval, Crows versus the Saints. The Saints, I tell you what, they've been improving the last few weeks. It was a very impressive win against Sydney, all things considered. A really sort of solid performance. Adelaide, they were going against Brisbane, but just not enough to knock off the Lions, but they've also been improved. However, no Isaac Rankin for the next few weeks, so that swings the pendulum in the visitors' favour heading into this one.
Yeah, it does. I don't know what happened with St Kilda in that middle part of the year. They just completely fell away. But the last probably month or so, even that Brisbane game where they lost, they looked really good. And, yeah, an amazing win against Sydney. They were 35 points down, did not look like it. And then they just discovered something in that third quarter. And Sydney couldn't go with them. It was a really gutsy win. And I think that can sort of lay the platform for them for next season. They're not going to play finals, but... yeah, there was enough to like for Saints supporters and Ross Lyon in that game, knocking off the ladder leaders. And Mateus Philippou, been a bit of a whipping boy, high draft pick, went back to the VFL, but that decision's justified now. He came out, first game back in the AFL, he was a star. He was so important in that victory. And, yeah, really good signs for the Saints there. But I think just at home, the Crows should do enough. Their form has been okay. They're not going to play finals either. They've been a bit disappointing, but... yeah, if that Isaac Rankin, that's a big blow. But I think just at home, they should get up by a few goals.
Oh, I disagree. I reckon the Saints are going to get up in this one. I reckon they're going to do it. I mean, they've hit some form at the right time. They have, that was such an impressive win last week. And really, I think they should have won their last two games. I think they probably should have. They had a real chance to beat Port Adelaide back at Marvel Stadium.
And, if there's any other team, they would have won that game.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that they were able to come back like that in that manner, I know it's on their home deck and everything, but against the benchmark this year, it really shows that they haven't thrown the towel in this year and just gone, that's it, we're not going to play finals. These games, it's all done. The confidence is gone. Like, they were actually able to galvanise and show something and give St Kilda fans just something to cheer about in what's been a disappointing year, where St Kilda fans' expectations were quite high, after last year making the finals. And I think they get up in this one, and I think we're going to see, we're going to see another big Mateus Philippou game. I mean, I think that last week was a real statement from him, and we're looking good for potentially multiple goals in this one for him as well. So I think that, this is, it's sometimes a good thing that you see these young players, they maybe go back to the VFL for a few weeks, just find some confidence, especially when they're high draft picks, there's so much pressure on them, at the top level. But if they can go to the VFL, low pressure environment, just find their feet, find the footy, and then come back when they're ready. I think they have handled the last few weeks well, after what was a few weeks where things weren't handled so well. But it looks like he's found his confidence again, which is so, so good to see. Saturday night at the G, Melbourne versus Essendon. The Bombers are up and about. The Edge is back. The Essendon Edge is back, leaving the G on Friday night. They were talking premierships. They were up and about.
Geez.
They were feeling they were
win
partying.
A final first.
Yeah, they were partying like it was 2000 out there at the MCG. They take on the Ds, who they beat West Coast on the weekend, but still, can't be completely convinced about Melbourne at the moment. But Essendon go into this game favourites, and I think rightfully so.
Oh, definitely rightfully so. And Mac's gone out for a few weeks, so you can't get a bigger loss than that. They're already without Christian Petrarca, so
one and two most important players. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I can't see the D's winning without Max Gawn. He's just such an important player. Still, absolute star, their captain. So yeah, I think the Bombers can keep that momentum going, and they might be looking good for top four. So they'll get two cracks at winning the final, at least.
It has to be this year if they make the top four.
They made a top. You can't go out in straight sets. If they made the top four,
I think there's the team they're coming up against know very well about what that's like in back-to-back years. So I think it's a guarantee. But surely,
I think the Bombers in this one, they were very impressive against Collingwood to be able to hang on to that one and respond after that. Blown away in that first quarter. Jack Crisp 3 goals in 3 minutes, unbelievable start. But the Bombers bounce back, and I think they can win this game.
Yeah, I think they get up too. I think they just get over the line in this one. I mean, that Max Gawn factor is a massive one. I think if Gawn plays, it's a completely different story. But Sam Draper was so good last week. And it actually makes selection very intriguing this week because Todd Goldstein was rested against Collingwood. And going into that, I thought maybe it actually works better for Darcy Cameron because Goldstein's had the wood over Darcy Cameron for so long. But Sam Draper he sort of rediscovered his best on the weekend. That was a really, really commanding performance.
Yeah, after the first quarter. He looked bad in the first quarter. He was rucking to Collingwood in that first quarter, and he responded really well. So I mean, if it probably is, a Tom Fullerton who comes in this week for I think his first game as a Demon, it's going to be tough going up against Draper, who's such an athletic beast around the ground. So I think the Bombers get up. I think Zach Merritt looking good for 25 plus, and I reckon on top of that maybe Nate Caddy as well potentially in for another big game. He was very good last week too. So another one for Bombers fans to get excited about. Sunday arvo, Gold Coast against Port Adelaide now. The Suns are back at home, so they should win this game. But Damien Hardwick was blunt as blunt can be after that loss against North Melbourne. He was straight to the point. It was one of the all-time great presser moments. I mean, there's something about Damien Hardwick at Marvel Stadium that brings out another side in him. We saw it, with him at the Tigers, but now we've seen it at Gold Coast. I mean, he summed it up. I mean, if Gold Coast are going to be taken seriously, like they have to start winning those sort of games. And until they start doing that, I mean, they can win all the games at home, but are we going to be able to take them seriously if they can't win away from being the home team? No, we can't. And they won't play finals if they don't win any games away from home. If you can't beat North Melbourne on the road, you're not going to beat too many other teams. The Kangaroos were great on the weekend. They're much improved from where they were early in the season. But like you said, if we want to take them seriously, they have to win those games. So, Hardwick was outstanding in that press conference, and that might be sort of the moment that you look back on and when this is the turning point for the Suns. Like enough is enough. Stop dishing up these rubbish performances on the road. So going back home, I think they win this game against Port Adelaide, who they haven't had the best record against in recent times. So the Power will have a sniff, but I think it's going to be tough as well. No Tuke Miller for a few weeks now, so that makes it really difficult. And those younger guys really need to step up in the midfield, which they have been doing at home anyway. Rao, Anderson, Flanders. It's their midfield now, so for a few weeks at least. I think the Suns.
Look, they should win this one, but I think there's equal pressure on Port Adelaide to really start stringing some wins together because it's all well and good to have beaten St Kilda by a couple goals. It was a really impressive win against the Bulldogs, don't get me wrong, but they have to continue the momentum because, again, they lose, that blowtorch just comes again. Like, you can only ease that pressure so much, especially with what the expectations are at Port Adelaide. But I think that Gold Coast respond at home. They've been so good whenever they've been the home team. I mean, they haven't lost. It's been one of the weirdest records I think we've seen in terms of a complete opposite when it comes to being the home and the away team. But I think they get up. I think they'll be a little bit too strong. But if Port Adelaide are able to win this, I mean, I think it would go a long way to sort of solidifying themselves as a finals team because, they need to just get some consistency, some continuity. I mean, you speak about the bad record. The team Gold Coast first beat ever in their AFL history was Port Adelaide back at, Amy Stadium. We're talking about the Tarps years. That was the Tarps year. So, if Gold Coast want to inflict some punishment on Port Adelaide, beating them would go a long way to doing that. So we'll see what happens on Sunday.
That might be something that Damien Hardwick touches on. He's great for those little themes during the week, so he might bring back some of that vision during the week. We'll see what happens. But, it should be a good game.
Absolutely. The other Sunday Arvo game at the G, Richmond versus GWS. I mean, 5 years ago, this was a blockbuster grand final that was a big fizz in the end, But these two teams meet here. The Tigers coming off that loss against Fremantle, where really no one expected them to go to Perth and win. They come up against the GWS side, who are rearing after that win against Carlton. Do you give Richmond any hope at home? I mean, historically, you'd say they've got a real chance, but, it's been a tough old year for them this season.
Yeah, I don't think so. They had a good few weeks there for a while. One in Adelaide, were competitive in Geelong, But yeah, their performances since have been not very good. They might get Dustin Martin back, but yeah, he's not the saviour these days. So I think the Giants are going to get a lot of confidence out of that win. They just had to win that last week, and it didn't look like it early, but just somehow turned it around and went back to their form early in the season. So yeah, the Giants should win this on the road.
Yeah, I think they will too. Jesse Hogan, multiple goals for me. I think GWS are going to start to flex. We spoke last week that if they were able to beat Carlton, it might be the turning point for their season to be able to rediscover some of their best. And they really shouldn't have any problems. I mean, similarly, when we talk about Gold Coast, you know, no disrespect to Richmond, but if you want to be taken seriously in the finals run, these are the games you've got to win, and you've got to win convincingly as well. So we'll see what the Giants are able to do this weekend. But the final game of the round, as we spoke about at the top, West Coast against Brisbane. Is it going to be the final game Adam Simpson coaches? Is it not? You guys probably at home know better than us, because by the time we finish recording, there might be a concrete answer. But this is a big one. The Lions, you know, they've started to find some form. They're back in the 8. They're, you know, raring at the moment against a West Coast team who, well, there could be a new coach bounce. There could be a farewell coach bounce. I mean, we've seen in the past when coaches get a farewell game that they tend to rise. I mean, you think about Nathan Buckley's last game as coach. You think about Brad Scott's last at North Melbourne as well a few years ago. Maybe, just maybe, West Coast can get up for this one, but they have been off the boiler the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, they have. Probably for the last 6 weeks or so. As we mentioned earlier, they had some good wins early in the season. Beat Melbourne, beat Fremantle, which just looks incredible. Thinking back on it now, Dockers supporters, if they miss out in the top 4, they will be ruining that Derby loss early in the season. So, yeah, as you said, like, it happens so often that you sack a coach, and whether they get a farewell game or not, the team usually responds. Go back to 2019, and the Lions are going to go into this game with that in the back of their minds. They played Carlton after Brendan Bolton was sacked, and then David T comes in and score an upset win. Patrick Cripps was sensational that day. He single-handedly got them over the line. But, yeah, I think that will be burning in the back of their minds going to this one, going, we can't let this happen again. So definitely a danger game for the Lions heading over there, but that they should account for them. There's too much to play for. They've won 5 in a row. Like, that was probably their worst performance in the last 6 weeks or so against Adelaide last week, but still did enough. And Charlie Cameron showing some signs that he might be getting there. Like, it looks like he's trying still too hard at the moment. He scored 2 goals late, but just doing some very uncharacteristic things. But yeah, I don't think he's too far away from really recapturing his best. So they've already had a game at Optus Stadium this season. So the Lions, yeah, I think it could either be really, really tight, or the Lions could absolutely blow them away. Like I'm not sure which way it's going to go, because the way West Coast have handled it this week, like, maybe they won't get that bounce because it's just been handled so badly. Like, if they came out and said, okay, Simpson's coaching the farewell game, okay, cool, everyone knows what's going on. Or if Simpson said, nah, I'm done, Jared Schofield's going to take the reins for the rest of the season, cool, we move on. But they still don't know. That creates uncertainty for the playing group and the whole club. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, what West Coast team turns up in this. Yeah. Very interesting, but I think the Lions.
Well, you think back to the management of when other examples of this, when coaches have been able to have that farewell game, usually it's been set in stone.
Yeah.
This is it.
At the press conference.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, you remember, you know, back in 21, I mean, the biggest Nathan Buckley, you know, being told, like, all right, this game against Melbourne, it's done. Like, I'm done. You know, Robert Harvey takes over the week after. It's done. Like, I'll be finishing up. And
Leon Cameron a few weeks before that.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, it was all just, okay, I am finished here. You know, I'm going to be handing it over, passing off the keys. You know, the messaging is clear from the top of the hierarchy right through to the bottom. It's clear for the public as well. So I think that bit of uncertainty, who knows how that plays on the playing group's minds. I mean, a lot of these guys have played under Adam Simpson for a long time, you know, going way back, not just the young ones, but thinking about premiership players and everything. And not even just the young ones having uncertainty, but yeah, the veterans as well. So I don't know if the bounce is going to come per se. I think just Brisbane will win this one comfortably. I think, you know, as well, Brisbane lost earlier in the year at Optus Stadium against Fremantle. One of those games they'd be looking at as, like, if they do miss the top 4, that they'd be looking at as that was one of the games right there that we may have left points on the table. And similarly, as we've spoken about a lot of teams, if you want to play finals, you've got to win these games. and I think the Lions will do just that. Ollie, time for us to wrap up. We're back again next week to review all the action. Hopefully, not too much drama at the Tribunal. I mean, the umpires, there was nothing with the umpires this week, so...
No, the umpires were good on the weekend.
Yeah, so hopefully more of the same. But we'll be back next week to review all the action, and we'll see you then.